Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We're going to be checking out a video titled Why Driving in Europe is Better Than America, an American expat's perspective. So a link for the original video will be in the description. So check out that video if you have the chance to do so. And we're going to be checking out this video, but are there any differences that I've noticed since I've actually been living in Finland regarding people driving compared to the United States? Well, I will say this. Here in Finland, what I've noticed is that no one wants to be behind no one, which I actually start to understand a lot more now that I drive. But yeah, we're going to be checking out this video right now, so thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe and share your feedback in the comment section if you've ever been to the United States and driven or have been driven in the United States, and how it is for you in Europe driving. So without further ado, let's get right into this video.
I love driving, and I especially love driving in Europe. I've been living in Europe for about 2 years now, originally from Orlando, Florida.
Shout out to Florida!
I've lived in Amsterdam for about 2 years.
Shout out to Florida. Shout out to Florida. Shout out to Florida. But yeah, I can right off the bat, I can see why he says what he said. Do not go to Florida. I'm trying to tell you, just listen to me. Don't go to Florida expecting that you're gonna have good drivers. They don't use indicators. They don't, and they're really aggressive and wild here in Florida. But in Florida, they're really. I'm telling you, do not. Just don't.
Now, Amsterdam isn't exactly a car place, but I've always been a car person,
Indeed.
and I've always loved driving. What I like about living in Europe is that European drivers are excellent, especially compared to American drivers. I was inspired for this video after watching a video by Tedward, which I'll link in the description below. In his video, he was explaining why Americans don't use a 3-lane highway correctly, and it got me thinking how much I appreciate driving in Europe. European drivers are some of the best I've seen, and I think some of the best in the world, and I'm hoping to explain why I believe so in this video. Now, I haven't done any research. This is just my experience, so if I'm wrong about anything, please correct me in the comments. This is just my perspective, having lived in Europe for 2 years, having driven mostly around Western European countries, such as Netherlands, Switzerland, France, Germany, UK, and in the US, I primarily have driven in Florida. So Florida's not exactly known for the best drivers, especially we get a lot of tourists who don't know how to drive in the US, and a lot of elderly folks, and just people who don't know the right rules of the road. So that's my benchmark. That's what I'm comparing against. One of the main reasons I think European drivers are better is just driving in general is a privilege. So if you look at most European places, most European cities, you don't need a car. You don't need to drive anywhere. Public transportation is well established. You can use a train, a metro, a tram.
Well, you know, for regarding his perspective right here, I do understand his perspective, but I will add something, which is what I found interesting in Finland. Did you know that regarding Finland, it is so expensive, and I think the entire Europe is probably this expensive. It is actually pretty difficult to get a driver's license. Yes, I got my Finnish driver's license in under a month. The theory exam and the driving exam under a month. One shot, actually 2 shot at the theory exam, because I went to the place and I was like, when is it possible to do the theory exam? And she was like, you can pop off right now. I was like, oh, I bet. Shit, I'm not ready, but shit, go ahead. And then I failed, but I got like 60 out of 70 questions correct. And I was like, shit, I'm gonna pull up tomorrow and I'm gonna do it tomorrow. Right? I go home, I do a little bit of research, and I just, you know, went back the other day and then I passed. Right? But then I did all that in under a month. However, I've seen people, you know, lose your license, and if you lose your license to drive in Finland, you got to do that over, and it's freaking expensive. It's 1,500 for like the minimum, if I'm not mistaken. I think so, right? So it's really expensive, and you can't afford to make these mistakes. However, in the United States, I don't think, you know, majority of people go through an agency to learn how to drive. They just use their parents' whip and they just whip it around in, you know, private land or whatever. And, you know, it's a lot easier to get a driver's license in the United States compared to Finland. Europe.
Get pretty much anywhere you need to go. You can use public transportation to get pretty much anywhere, so you don't really need to drive. Only if you live in
Indeed.
more suburban parts of Europe, but even then, public transportation is still available. So Europeans don't have to drive. They want to drive. And because they want to drive, they put more effort into it. On top of that, getting a driver's license in most European countries is a much more involved and expensive process.
Indeed.
For example, in the Netherlands, getting a driver's license can cost a couple €1,000 because you have to do mandatory driving lessons.
Holy
On top of that, the age to get a driver's license is much older than most states in the US. So I believe in the Netherlands you can start
18.
learning to drive around 16 and a half years old. That's when you do your theory test and then you start doing driving lessons. You don't have a full driver's license without restrictions until you're 18 years old. Compared to Florida, where I'm from, you start driving at 15, you do your theory test and you start driving at 15, and you only have to have a learner's permit for 1 year, and there's no mandatory driving lessons. Your parents can teach you how to drive. On top of that, the cost in general for driving is much lower. The cost of getting a driver's license is much lower in the US. And driving is kind of a necessity in a lot of parts of the United States, except for major metropolitan cities.
Indeed.
You have to drive. So getting a driver's license is less of a privilege in the US and more of a necessity.
Necessity.
So that distinction alone, I think, contributes to a lot of the differences that I'm going to point out. So getting a driver's license is a much more involved process, especially in countries like the Netherlands. In Germany, it also requires mandatory lessons. It costs a lot of money. So when they invest that much into getting a driver's license, they don't want to lose it. They learn to drive properly. They learn the right rules of the road. They don't want to do anything to jeopardize that, and they drive accordingly. You can see here in this example, I'm just outside of Amsterdam. There's nobody cruising in the left lane. I'm driving at 5:30 in the afternoon right now. Nobody is cruising in the left lane. The left lane is only for passing. You can see how people use the lanes. They're very well disciplined. And that's a common theme. They're well-disciplined drivers. This goes back to how they learn to drive. They have to take mandatory lessons. Their parents aren't teaching them to drive. Their parents aren't...
Exactly, and the parents are not passing down bad habits and saying, yeah, you can do this. You don't have to use an indicator. Because he's talking about Florida. And yeah, it's a big problem there. It's psycho. I'm telling you that. It's crazy. Okay? It's really crazy. All right? But you can clearly see what he's talking about with the left lane, man. Like, in the United States, I'm telling you, everybody just going to be just like... You know, and you have 3 lines of cars, and that's what I was talking about in the beginning of this video. Finns are more aggressive with how they're driving. Europeans probably in general, they're more aggressive, so they're not trying to have a mistake made, so they move with a little bit more prompt. They move a little bit more faster to get out of the way where there could be a pileup or a situation to happen. And I realized it. I was way more chill when I was when I just started driving in Finland, until I realized, wait a minute, some people, it's either they're going to live on their break and they might cause an issue for you. So you're better off being around that person. And number 2, because it snows like shit ton here, guess what? When people drive, the braking distance, all these type of things, you know, you're better off being in front of them. So yeah.
Passing on bad habits about driving. They're learning the proper rules of the road. They're executing them while they learn to drive. So even though you take a theory test in the US on what the rules of the road are, you don't really remember that. You remember what you learned while you were learning to drive.
Exactly.
And oftentimes that's from what your parents taught you. And that's not the case in Europe. You'll see here the highway just widened up and people immediately start moving to the right. Not everybody, but most people do. Nobody's fighting. Nobody's rushing. They're just following the rules. They're well disciplined.
Nah, people rushing. They rushing to get to where they're going, but they doing it the right way. You know what I mean? Look at those 2 cars that overtook him. Yeah, they're going about their business and they doing it the right way. They're not overtaking over here. They're going over there because that's where they're supposed to be. And your ass, who is slow, go over there. It's simple as that. So they're doing things the right way. They got to move with speed too, you know, a little bit of urgency because they got places to be. And if they're not speeding, why not do what you got to do?
Don't get me wrong, not everybody follows every rule. You can see there are some more aggressive drivers sometimes, but it's not the norm.
Yeah, but what I think is there's nothing wrong with driving more aggressive. To be more aggressive, people say aggressive, but I would rather say assertive. You know what you're doing and you're doing it well, right? And you're going to, you don't really care to go to the speed limit. That's what I think personally. I wouldn't consider it aggressive, but you could say it's aggressive. But I don't think aggressive driving is a problem. I think reckless driving is the problem.
Even the more aggressive ones tend to get on their way, get out of the way. They're not messing with anybody. They're not pissing anybody off.
Exactly.
There's no real road rage.
Dang, look at it.
So discipline is one of those key important attributes.
Indeed.
The next thing is the roads in general. The roads are well maintained. I'm going off of what I've seen in the Netherlands and Germany. Not every European country has the same privilege. I've seen some pretty poor roads in countries like Belgium. And even I've heard in Italy, roads aren't as nice. But you can see here the highway is well maintained. There are no potholes. It's quite wide. And people use the lanes correctly. So even though there's a lot of lanes, it allows for a lot of capacity because people actually follow the rules of the road. They stay to the right. They only pass on the left. They pass and then they get back over. And that's the general way it works here. So when they add more lanes, when the highway is wider, it allows for much more free-flowing traffic, a lot more capacity, a lot more cars. Unlike places like Houston where they added lanes, nobody follows proper rules there, so they continue to sit in the left lane, even if it's 16 lanes wide, and it doesn't help the traffic situation at all. In this area, this is a speed-controlled area, so it's actually controlled by average speed cameras. I'll deep dive into that in a separate video, but the Netherlands has some of the strictest speed laws in Europe. Talking about the rules of the road, when you look at truckers, they also follow the rules very strictly in Europe.
I genuinely believe that truck drivers are one that should never mess with the rules of the road. Like in general, I think everybody should follow the rules of the road. It's not that hard to follow the rules of the road, in my humble opinion. There's like, even if you're one of those drivers who are, you about that speed and like you're not, the best thing you can do is just to drive at the speed limit, if you know what I mean. But to drive more aggressive and faster, I don't have a problem with that, as long as you're not tailgating, you're not turning without using your signals and stuff like that, reckless overtaking, stuff like that. But yeah, go ahead. But if you're a truck driver, you gotta follow the rules to the T, man. Make sure that you're slowing down in time. You gotta do what you gotta do, in my humble opinion.
To the right, they rarely are passing. There are zones where they're not allowed to pass. They're rarely in the left lane. They're rarely passing. When they do pass, they get back over to the right lane immediately. There's less clogging of traffic. So discipline, learning the rules of the road, following them, these are important themes. The process to get a driver's license is much more involved, much more strict.
Indeed.
Another thing with driving in Europe, in my opinion, the cars are much more solid. They're much more roadworthy.
Well maintained.
You have vehicle inspections, so people can't drive old, beat-up cars. You have to have your vehicle inspected ever so often. Depending on the age of the vehicle, it's either once a year or once every few years. There's rules about what the vehicle can or can't have equipped on it. It has to pass inspection for you to keep driving it on the road. So the roadworthiness of vehicles is also better. And some states have this. Florida in particular doesn't have this. So you see people driving on the highway with rickety vehicles that are falling apart. They've gotten into an accident and they haven't fixed the vehicle. It's a road hazard, in my opinion.
I think Florida and Texas probably has the most loose vehicle laws in the United States. I think both of them has it. I'm not sure, but if there's any other state that are comparable. But yeah, they're very, with the vehicle laws. Like, yeah.
Happen here. People maintain their cars well in the first place. They have to maintain them well because to keep driving them on the road, they have to pass the inspections. Germany has some of the strictest inspection laws. You can see many videos on YouTube about passing the TÜV inspection. I haven't had to go through this personally in the Netherlands, but I do know that inspections are required. I haven't seen any, poorly maintained vehicles on the road. And because of this, because of the discipline, because of the roadworthiness of the vehicles, generally Europe has higher speed limits. The Netherlands used to have a national speed limit on the highway of 130 kilometers an hour, which equates to 81 miles per hour. People used to drive faster than that. Recently, as of March of 2020, there's a national speed limit of 100 kilometers an hour until 7 p.m. Some roads are still 100 kilometers per hour in general. I'll do a separate deep dive into.
I like that exception. I ain't gonna hold you. I think we should utilize the little 100 before 7 p.m. type vibe. I like that because after 7 we going crazy. Yeah, because I have no issue with people speed, and I've seen some people like one recently time I was driving and I was behind, this one vehicle, and I was just waiting for a moment to overtake this person because I clearly saw this person is not what I want to be behind, right? They press the brake a lot when cornering, and it's somebody who's a little bit more scared to drive, in other words. No disrespect to that person. They know what they're doing, they're just a little bit more scared, right? And I was behind that person and I kept braking hard too, and I was like, dang, I can't be behind this person. It's toxic. And a car just like from behind me, right in front of me. I'm like, damn, calm down. What happened was that there was almost an accident. And then that car who overtook me was like, you know what? Send it. Because somebody was turning and they just made the turn so slow, knowing that there's like literally a bunch of people behind them, right? And yeah, there was almost an accident. And then the guy, who was almost in the accident, he just went, phew, and he send it. And then eventually I overtook as well. But those are the minor things that you'll find in Finland. I don't see people driving recklessly. You'll find people driving a little bit, what you'd say, on the slower side because they're scared or intimidated by the weather or something, or the corners or something. And, you'll find, little issues like that. But generally speaking, I do not see people in Finland driving raggedy ass vehicles or, driving recklessly. No, even the young dudes who be driving and, speeding and stuff like that, they don't be doing some reckless shit.
That in another video about the Netherlands. But in general, countries like Germany or France, the highest speed limit you'll see on suburban highways is 130 kilometers an hour. And people drive faster than that. You can easily drive 140 kilometers an hour without any issue. And again, if everybody follows these rules of the road, driving that fast, even on narrow highways, isn't an issue. You can also see in the Autobahn, people driving much faster than that. It's a 2-lane highway, yet there's very little accidents. And that goes back to the discipline of following the rules of the road. People keep to the right. Even if somebody is driving faster than you, it's completely safe. I'll have to do another video about the Autobahn because that's a whole experience in and of itself. As an American, I truly love and appreciate the Autobahn, and I wish that America had that privilege, but honestly, the drivers don't deserve it. Another reason driving in Europe is so much better, again, going back to the discipline, you'll see this as a common theme. There's very little distracted driving. People are focused on driving while they're driving.
Indeed.
They're not on their phones. They're not eating. They're not really drinking coffee. They're not reading a book. They're not doing all of these crazy things you see people.
Imagine reading a book while driving. That is insane. But he's definitely, right about this situation. Doing all these things impacts your driving to the highest degree, and I honestly don't understand why so many people in this world is like, okay, I'm gonna drink and drive. And I'm not talking about alcohol. I'm talking about just any beverage at all. Like if you just, gulp some water, I can understand you're a little bit, thirsty, whatever. I get it, but hot beverage is not the same as a cold beverage or a room temperature beverage, I should say, right? When a hot beverage spills, you're going to react in a negative way. You're likely going to swerve, swing, or something, right? And it's really quite toxic that people would do that, even using phones while driving, right? It's too distracted.
In America do while they drive, they're focused on driving, and they have to be focused on driving. You're not allowed to be using your phone. You're not allowed to be eating while you're driving. You're not allowed to be doing anything but driving while you're driving. In fact, in the Netherlands, they started rolling out a system where there are cameras over the highways that will look at cars and take pictures. If you're caught driving while you're on your phone or doing something while you're distracted while you're driving, they'll actually mail you a ticket. So they're very strict about enforcing no distracted driving, and people follow it. People focus on driving. And when you focus on driving and you have drivers that are focused on driving, you can have much more freedom and much more driving enjoyment. So distracted driving isn't really a thing here, and it's really well enforced. I think that helps contribute to some of the driving characteristics of some of the roads. People are much more focused. So there aren't really distractions while you're driving. You're focused on driving, you're paying attention, and this is part of the reason why there are some things you really need to pay attention to while you're driving in Europe. Things like roundabouts, things like speed humps, things like pedestrian zones, bicycle lanes, trams, buses, horses that are allowed to be in traffic, a lot of different things that you need to pay attention to, and that's why you really need to pay attention while you're driving, and Europeans do in general. Now, as an American driving in Europe, I am guilty of carrying over some of my bad habits about distracted driving, but when I need to pay attention, I pay attention.
Lock in.
And I've always thought of that in the US as well. I pay attention while I'm driving, I focus on driving, I get pleasure out of that, and that's the norm here in Europe. You drive when you're driving. You're not doing anything else. It's not a time when you're, catching up on emails or reading a book or eating your lunch. You can see here, this is one of these roads that's almost one car width wide. It shares a bicycle lane, and this is a bi-directional road. You really have to pay attention here. You have to mind the space.
It's crazy because they just chopping it up on that road. They got their confidence. They know what they're doing. I don't call it aggressive. I call it confident. They know what they're doing. Let them do it.
If a car's coming in the other direction, you have to squeeze to the right and make sure there's enough space. But when the road is empty like this, you can enjoy it. One difference with Europe, generally people don't use cars to commute. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of people that do commute to work by car in Europe and European cities. But in general, cost of parking is very expensive. Fuel is very expensive. People don't use a car to commute if they don't have to. So people will often defer to public transportation to get to work. So people aren't driving regularly as much as they do in the US. So usually when they're driving, it's for pleasure, not so much necessity. Of course, it's maybe necessity to go somewhere, but they're focused on driving while they're doing it. It's not part of their morning commute. And this is generally speaking, this is my take. It's not scientific, of course.
Indeed.
I like that I can choose to drive when I want to drive. I can enjoy driving. I'm lucky that I live in Amsterdam. I don't have to commute. I don't have to commute by car. Another thing I've noticed is when people are towing something or carrying cargo, it's well secured. It's covered with a net. Things don't fly out of trucks. Things don't fly out of trailers.
This is facts, and the weight capacity on these are literally taught in driving school in Finland. It is insane how specific, and fully covered driving in Europe is.
People, when they're towing something or when they're carrying something or hauling something, they're staying to the right. They're driving in the slower lane. They're not passing anybody. They're not driving erratically. I remember regularly seeing in Florida landscaping trucks with trailers with things that are just bouncing around, flying around, things that could fly off of the trailer in any second. And those guys are driving 80-something miles an hour in the passing lane, passing cars, driving erratically. That just doesn't happen here. When you consider some of the points that I've mentioned, driving in Europe is overall safer. If people follow the rules, it makes for a safer experience for cars, for pedestrians, for cyclists. It also makes for a better driving experience as a driver. And that's why I love driving in Europe. After a long road trip, I don't feel exhausted. I don't feel like I was dealing with a lot of bad drivers. I don't feel like I was dealing with a lot of people sitting in the left lane. I don't feel that fatigue that you feel when you drive in America. I actually feel quite relaxed while I drive. And it's because there's similar people like me driving, people who want to drive, people who enjoy driving, people who pay attention while they're driving. So I feel like I'm sharing the road with a lot of like-minded individuals. I also feel like driving in Europe, I've become a better driver. I've learned things that I didn't learn in America. Roundabouts, for example, dealing with cyclists regularly. Like I said, this is my personal experience. It's definitely not fact. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Thanks for watching.
Indeed, man, indeed. I appreciate this video because I can personally relate. Because I've seen the improvements since living in, Finland. I can see clear difference in improvements regarding driving in Finland, and it's actually a beautiful thing to see. You know, it's a beautiful thing to see. Like, it's rare that you see an accident. Like, I've seen, you know, crashed vehicles in Finland, you know, snow issues in Finland. In fact, I've actually had issues in Finland regarding the snow. That's something that you'd have to watch my other personal channel about me in Finland to find out about. But yeah, I've had issues, you know, with driving in Finland. But yeah, you know, it's basic stuff that would cause you to have issues in Finland, like snow and, you know, stuff like that. But apart from that, no, it's a great place to drive. But anyways, man, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate that. I'm out of here. Until next time, peace.